You need people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Okay, we'll start with this. It was officially announced earlier today, next month on the 20th, on the undercard of Collazo versus Vaison, undisputed flyweight champion Gabi Fundora will be returning to action to make a defense of her undisputed crown against Argentina's own Jaron Granadino. Gabi Fundora, who sports a professional record of 16 wins with no losses, no draws, and 8 knockouts, seems to be remaining in the flyweight division a while longer to make another defense of her undisputed crown on the heels of her knockout win over a then unbeaten Mariling Badillo. Now she's fighting Jaron Granadino, who sports a professional record of 12 wins with 2 losses, 4 draws, with only 1 recorded knockout, having never been knocked out in 18 professional bouts, currently on a 2-fight winning streak. Her record is kind of up and down, but all of it does lend itself to Jaron's overall experience as a fighter. I think the crowned jewel of her resume so far is a win over former champion Maciela Lujan in June of this year. So she faced a former champion in her last fight, and she's going to face a current reigning undisputed champion in her next one. The only champion at this weight. If you want a belt at flyweight, you have to go through Gabi Fundora, who not but 5 days ago was called out by the WBA interim champion Viviana Ruiz of Australia, who set a challenge for the undisputed crown. Gabi Fundora, your reign as the youngest undisputed champion is inspiring, and your dedication in the ring is unmatched. I, Viviana Ruiz, am ready to test that legacy with the same hard work, passion, and mission to be the best. Let's make history together in a title fight that fans deserve to see. Golden Boy, I'm calling for a shot at the IBF, WBA, WBC, and WBO flyweight titles. My team is ready to work with you to set this up. Let's bring an unforgettable battle to the ring. I take it that the time of Gabi's fight announcement indicates that by the time Viviana Ruiz uploaded this call-out, the fight was already made. Gabi was already spoken for. A fight with Viviana is perhaps something that Gabi can explore later on in the year. Or next year, depending on how things go with Granadino. So Gabi fought 3 times last year, and she is set to see action at least 2 this one. She was last in action in April. She's going to be in action again next month. And I figure that if she can make short work of Granadino, they can squeeze in another fight before the year is out, say in November or December. She's amassing a very respectable resume, though most won't know it because the flyweight division doesn't have the same profile as, say, the lightweight division, super lightweight, or welter, with wins over 2 reigning champions in Mexico's own Arely Musinho and Argentina's own Gabriela Fundora, 2 more wins over 2 unbeaten up-and-comers in Mariling Badillo, and an amateur standout in Cristina Cruz, all of which she stopped. Gabi is the goods. Gabi's resume has a lot of substance, even though she herself doesn't have that many fights. I believe that Granadino actually has more recorded fights, more recorded bouts than Gabi, but it's Gabi's resume that has all the substance. She makes me proud to be from Coachella, California.
You're not from Coachella!
It's not the point. The point is that Gabi Fundora, a fighter who I tabbed a long time ago to go all the way, is proving me right, fight by fight. And this really is just the beginning for Gabi. As she moves up in weight, fills out as she matures in age, she will become stronger and stronger and more experienced and more dangerous. There will come a time when Gabi Fundora ascends to the super flyweight division, and those champions better look out. They can breathe a sigh of relief momentarily that Gabby is staying at flyweight a while longer for at least one more defense, maybe two, maybe three, but at some point, she's gonna move up, and they better get ready. Who I like to liken Gabby Fundora to is tantamount to a modern-day Tommy Hearns. All the height, all the length, all the devastating power. I love watching Gabby work. It's a thing of beauty. Look for the ring return of Gabby Fundora next month on the 20th, and we'll talk more about the fight as the fight date approaches. In other news, the UFC announced a landmark deal with Paramount Plus. They are now migrating from ESPN over to Paramount. And Dana White said this historic deal with Paramount and CBS is incredible for UFC fans and our athletes. For the first time ever, fans in the United States will have access to all UFC content without a pay-per-view model, making it more affordable and accessible to view the greatest fights on a massive platform. This deal puts UFC amongst the biggest sports in the world. The exposure provided by Paramount and CBS networks under this new structure is a huge win for our athletes and anyone who watches and loves this sport, where it used to cost you about $1,160 to take in all the UFC events based on the old pay-per-view model. Based on the new model, it'll only cost you about $120.
What's that, the price of a Paramount Plus subscription?
And there was a lot of speculation about this because for months we heard that the UFC would be leaving ESPN. Then, last week, ESPN announced a big deal with the WWE, who are connected to the UFC. So for a second there, it kinda looked like maybe the UFC would stay.
For a second.
But no, the initial gossips were true, and UFC ended up leaving anyway, leaving ESPN. The relevance of that to the sport of boxing, ESPN may have just inked a landmark deal with both the NFL and the WWE, which should more than make up for the viewership they've been losing as more and more Americans are cutting the cord and moving away from basic cable packages. Between the fanfare of the NFL, which is arguably the most watched sport, if not the most watched sport in the country, and the WWE and all of their fanfare, that's tantamount to printing money.
This should more than make up for the viewership that ESPN as a platform has been steadily losing over time. But where did the money come from to finance all of this?
Don't forget who owns ESPN. Disney. ESPN by themselves as a platform couldn't have come up with the money for both an NFL deal and a WWE deal. The money came from Disney, who basically bailed them out to keep them afloat.
Okay, that's awesome. What the hell does any of this have to do with boxing?
With the Top Rank deal having ended last month, and with the UFC having left ESPN, they are no longer in the combat sports business.
I mean, professional wrestling draws eyes, but it's not a combat sport. It's sports entertainment.
But it's not a combat sport. The UFC was rumored to be leaving ESPN for a very long time, and I talked about it here on the channel for a very long time. That's one less thing that ESPN has to spend money on.
I have it on good authority that ESPN wasn't actually happy with UFC's metrics, the numbers they were bringing in. That was based on the old model, though.
They have since abandoned that old pay-per-view model for one that makes the sport more accessible to the consumer, and where that segues into boxing and a boxing conversation.
Isn't that what I've been talking about here on the channel for years now? There's too many pay-per-views out there. The sport is too difficult to get to.
Too expensive, and it would seem that that didn't just apply to boxing, it also applied to MMA, to the UFC. Veteran boxing scribe Marcos Villegas said tremendous pressure now for boxing to end pay-per-views, seeing what UFC has done today. Will be interesting to see if the industry adjusts or goes about business as usual in unusual times. For years now, I've talked about boxing oversaturating the market with pay-per-views, trying to squeeze blood out of a grape.
But when you talk about an overabundance of pay-per-views in the American market, you're not really talking about Matchroom or Golden Boy because they didn't do that many. DAZN didn't even have pay-per-view functionality until 2022.
Circa 2021 or 2022. So you can't be talking about Matchroom and you can't be talking about Golden Boy. You can't be talking about Top Rank because they did even less pay-per-views than Matchroom and Golden Boy.
Bob Arum said it years ago. He made it a point to keep as many fights off pay-per-view as possible. So if it wasn't Matchroom, and it wasn't Golden Boy, and it wasn't Top Rank oversaturating the market with box office fights, who was it?
You know who it was. It was the PBC. The PBC operates almost exclusively on pay-per-view now. Between the broadcast deal that they had on Fox and the broadcast deal that they had on Showtime, they were the ones inundating all of us with pay-per-view after pay-per-view, paywall after paywall. Nobody else, nobody more in the American market was doing pay-per-view than them. So if there's pressure on anybody to scale that back and abandon that old model, the pressure is on them.
It's on the PBC.
They only did about 5 shows last year, and 4 of them were pay-per-views.
It's not that different this year.
Before this landmark deal between the UFC and Paramount Plus was announced, it was already announced beforehand that Turki El Sheikh would be scaling down pay-per-views as of November of this year.
But you can hardly fault Turki El Sheikh for an oversaturated pay-per-view market since Turkey didn't come into it until what? 2023? Late 2023.
And his pay-per-views don't even cost as much as the PBC's most of the time. So he's really not the one to blame here, and he's really not the one under pressure.
They are.
The outfit that was just expecting me and you to pay $80 to see a 46-year-old Manny Pacquiao fight a C-class fighter in Mario Barrios. $80.
80 more to see Gervonta Davis escape with a draw that should have been a loss a few months before that.
I have it on good authority. The PBC are planning another pay-per-view show in late October that could be headlined by Sebastian Fundora against Keith Thurman. There is also Manny Pacquiao's proposed ring return in December. You can expect that to be a pay-per-view also.
Gervonta Davis's next fight, whenever that is, you can expect that to be a pay-per-view also. See, what I'm getting at is, all the other game in town are not as reliant on the box office as the PBC is. So if anybody's under pressure,
it's them. It's always been them because boxing was already moving in this direction, scaling down pay-per-views and making the sport more accessible to the consumer. Boxing was already moving in that direction.
It's only the PBC that was and still is relying on the pay-per-view model, that antiquated model that in and of itself relies on an organic grassroots demand, which most of the time their fights don't have.
No one was asking Gervonta Davis to fight the majority of guys that he fought on pay-per-view. And what's it up to now? 7 or 8 appearances? Only one of them was a big fight.
The majority of box office fights they did, people were not asking for. And it's not pay-per-view worthy because you say it is. It's only pay-per-view worthy when we say.
When we pay. The ends have to justify the means. If it's pay-per-view worthy, it'll show up in the numbers. More often than not, it didn't.
And still doesn't. I think Manny Pacquiao is a legend, one of the greats, easily. But nobody was asking him to come out of retirement 4 years removed from the sport and to box Mario Barrios?
No one was demanding that Gervonta Davis fight either Frank Martin or Lamont Roach, at least not enough people to justify putting that on pay-per-view.
200,000 here, 200,000 there, just over, just under. Let me let you in on a little secret. Those are not good numbers.
They never were. The size of the audience that you're alienating by putting those fights behind a paywall isn't justified because you did 200 and change, or just under 200.
Think about how many eyes you're not drawing to the platform by putting those fights behind a paywall so that you can make a few more bucks. Just a few, not even a lot.
And the rest of those eyes that should have been going to the platform to bolster its viewership and subscriptions end up going to illegal streams that don't benefit anyone. So this current trajectory for combat sports, away from pay-per-view and towards something more accessible.
Believe it or not, most of the boxing people aren't under pressure based on that because they were already moving away from that, save one outfit.
The PBC. they were doing more pay-per-views than everybody. Over to the Matchroom show, that coincidentally is not a pay-per-view.
Which is what I just said.
Matchroom doesn't really do that many pay-per-views. They never did. Jaron Ennis will be facing Uisma Lima of Angola, who sports a professional record of 14 wins with 1 loss, no draws, 10 knockouts, having never been knocked out in 15 professional bouts, a little-known challenger who lost one to Aaron McKenna back in June of 2023, who will be facing unbeaten Jaron Ennis, 34-0.
30 KOs in his maiden voyage, his maiden fight in the junior middleweight division, a WBA eliminator of sorts that will line up the winner to fight for the WBA title, but we all know that the WBA champion is Terrence Crawford. And we all know that Terrence is en route to his super fight at super middle with Canelo Alvarez next month, making it very unlikely that he returns to the junior middleweight division. So we see what the play here is. They want to line up Jaron Ennis for that title, so if and when it goes vacant, he can fight for it.
The guy he's fighting, Uisma Lima, was last in action in May of this year, and he fought 2 times last year. He's been keeping a steady schedule of fights against pedestrian-level opponents, pedestrian-level competition. Yeah, a lot of these guys are unbeaten, but also unproven. 4 of the last 6 guys that he fought were unbeaten fighters, but unproven at world level. He's 5-1 in his last 6.
Not a sexy fight. Not a sexy opponent. It's not what people want to see from Jaron Ennis. There's been a lot of hype around this guy for, I'd say, the last 3 going on 4 years. And now people are expecting Boots to make good on that hype. Being in as deep a division as junior middle, they wanted someone more proven, more familiar, and unfortunately for Lima, he just doesn't fit that bill.
There really wouldn't be this much pressure on Boots to perform if not for the hyperbole, if not for the hype that surrounded him. Moving up to junior middle and easing yourself into that weight class, taking your time before you jump into the deep end, seems reasonable enough, but more is expected of Boots because of the hype. So what they wanted was a Virgil Ortiz or a Sergey Boachuk, and his Rael Madrimov, hell, even a Jesus Ramos, somebody like that.
Not this.
Myself, I'm not as impatient with Boots as some others, but I still understand that he brought this on himself. Cuba's own Ioannis Tellez is the WBA's interim champion. This is a fight that we might see Boots in down the line, as Terrence Crawford vacates the WBA title.
Should Jaron Ennis make it past Lima, Boots versus Tellez.
That is something we might see next year for the full WBA title. And that's a solid fight. In some ways, so is the Lima fight. So is this one. But to whom much is given, much is expected. And Boots got a lot of praise. He was given a lot of accolades for pouncing on guys nobody gave a shot. Nobody gave a chance. So now, there are a lot of people. They are expecting Boots to make good on that hype.
Is that junior middle now? And there are going to be that many more questions that need answers, as Boots is a fighter who largely benefited from a noticeable size advantage over most other welterweights, and that advantage dissipates the further up he goes. He's not going to be towering over most of these junior middles. Not the upper echelon guys.
Even if this is a healthier weight for him, that might result in a faster Boots, a sharper Boots, maybe even a stronger one that's going to be against guys that are bigger than what he is used to.